Alien and Predator, two of the most iconic movies and creatures in all of sci-fi. The independent creation of these two beasties spawned a detailed and fantastic history of conflict, spanning dozens of comics, several games, and 2 movies. But what if their story has the potential to be far older than has previously been shown? In this episode of Skullywag Speculative, I'm going to use basic principles of evolutionary biology to show how an alien-like species and a predator-like species could be considered to be distantly related. In other words, they could have evolved from a common ancestor. So I'm going to finish up with an example of what this hypothetical ancestor might have looked like. Dr. Rex here. Welcome to the Skullywag Lab, where I present the bare bones fundamentals of skull science. Now, I'm a massive fan of the Alien and Predator franchises. I'd put Alien and Aliens in my personal list of top 20 best movies of all time.
Let's rock!
And Predator, starring Uncle Arnold himself, is probably the movie I've watched more than any other movie in my entire life. Also in my top 20.
If it bleeds, we can kill it.
And that's why I want to use these two legends of sci-fi to break down how common features in the appearance of different creatures can provide evidence of their shared ancestry. So let's get into it. It's hard to overstate just how important the anatomy of mouthparts can be in determining species relations. If you think about different groups of animals, all kinds of unique configurations of bitey bits have evolved and often represent definitive features of the groups that have them. This includes various kinds of probosces in different groups of worms, the 5 tooth-like plates in the Aristotle's lantern of sea urchins, the mandibles and palps of insects, the radula of mollusks, which is kind of like a tongue covered in a conveyor belt of teeth, and there's plenty of others. It often seems as though once a set of oral parts evolve in a group of animals, as long as the animals still need to bite into food and don't become filter feeders or anything, that it's there to stay throughout the evolution and diversification of the group going forward. This is related to the concept of phylogenetic inertia, which suggests that features of descendants are limited to the features inherited by their ancestors. A good example of how important mouthparts are in identifying species relationships can be seen in vertebrate gnathostomes, to which we belong. Our jaws evolved from the gill supports of aquatic ancestors and have been fairly consistent in their overall anatomy ever since. But changes to the basic structure can and have frequently happened. This might be in response to environmental changes, shifts in diet, or other reasons, and these can be highly diagnostic of species relations. Take carnivores for example. The group Carnivora, which includes the lineages of dogs, cats, bears, seals, and others, is broadly defined by 6 main features. 4 of these involve features of the skull, and of these, 2 are related to the teeth. These kinds of features that are found across many groups of animals that define the larger group they belong to are called synapomorphies. As another example, a group of extinct short-faced kangaroos called the Thenurinae are defined by 9 synapomorphies. These features, unique to the group, are all found in the skull, and over half of them are directly related to the jaw anatomy. Well, okay Rex, that's all well and good, but how is this related to the alien and the predator again? Well, let's take a look at the anatomy of the mouth region in the alien or xenomorph. There's clearly 2 parts to this mouth, with what appears to be an outer mouth housing an inner jaw, or pharyngeal jaws as people like to call them. So we have one internal jaw that closes dorsoventrally, meaning that it shuts upwards and downwards. But this is encapsulated in a second larger jaw. This overall oral anatomy would be considered a highly unique and diagnostic feature that other species closely related to the xenomorph would likely have as well. And it would be unlikely to evolve often and independently, especially across planets. What's interesting about this is when we take a look at the predator's mouth, they have the exact same configuration. An inner jaw that closes vertically, encapsulated by an outer jaw. The inner jaw may have become secondarily fused to the skull, and it doesn't project out like the aliens does, and that outer jaw might be highly modified with reduced dentition, but it's all definitely there. When the same structures have become adapted for different purposes as a result of descent with modification from a common ancestor, this is known as homology. And that's what we can see here with the divergent anatomy of these same structures. Now your first thoughts might be, come on Rex, those outer jaws on the alien and the predator, they're nothing alike at all. I mean, the predator's outer jaws, or mandibles as Jim Cameron famously called them, aren't even connected. But what if I told you that most animals we're related to don't have a fully connected jaw either? In fact, the vast majority of mammals don't have a single jawbone like us, but two independent dentaries connected by a ligament. Just like in this kangaroo mandible here, where the two dentaries are held together by a ligament in a region called the mandibular symphysis. And it's actually far rarer for this to be completely fused into a single bone the way it is in humans. The reason why snakes can open their mouths so wide is because they can stretch apart their dentaries. This has been played with in movies with more human-like monsters as well. And the mouth parts of some fish, like fringeheads, look strangely similar to the predator's mouth indeed. Fusion of the inner jaw to the cranium is nothing new either. When bones of the cranium have joints and can move around during biting, this is called cranial kinesis. Akinesis is the opposite. Some groups of animals, like crocodiles, turtles, and even mammals, have ancestors that likely had crania with more moving parts, but they've since evolved akinetic crania with fused bones that can't really move around as much. The point I'm making here is that if I had some ultimate badass serve me up a dead alien and a dead predator side by side, I'd probably conclude after a reasonably fast inspection of their basic features that they had a shared common ancestry from a synapomorphic or homologous bi-oral configuration. In all likelihood, the differences we see in their overall anatomy would be a product of millions of years of evolutionary divergence, but no more divergent than what we see in a horseshoe crab and a cockroach, or a octopus and a garden snail. So are there any other obvious examples of creatures in the movies that we might consider related to the xenomorph and the predator? I think there is. If we take a look at this huge skull on the trophy wall in Predator 2, you can see it also has the same bi-oral anatomy. You could even reason that this species is likely more closely related to the predator than the xenomorph, because its outer jaw dentaries are unfused and its inner jaw is fused to the skull, just like in the predator. You could think of this like comparing a human skull with a lion skull and a lizard skull. The greatest similarity between the human and lion skulls suggests that they're more closely related than either the human or lion are to the lizard. The reasoning behind this comes from one of my absolute favourite words in science: parsimony. Parsimony in evolution basically means that when you have multiple competing hypotheses about how species evolved, the one requiring the least number of evolutionary changes is usually the correct one. For example, which would be more likely? That humans evolve relatively larger brains than most other species, or that all other primates, and most other species for that matter, evolve relatively smaller brains than humans? It'd probably be the first option, right? Using this logic, humans are also more likely to share a more recent common ancestor with the lion than the lizard, because the alternative would have to be that the lion independently evolved the ear bones, jaw structure, and other features that are also seen in humans. This is highly unlikely. Instead, humans and lions are far more likely to share a common ancestor that evolved these features on its own after diverging from the lineage that led to lizards. And using this same logic, the owner of this gigantic skull here would be more closely related to the predator than to the alien. And based on parsimonious reasoning, the closest relatives of humans in all of sci-fi would have to be Vulcans! So maybe some of those old Star Trek aliens weren't the most creative, but I guess they were kind of limited with what they could come up with at the time. Wait, wasn't Spock like half human, half Vulcan? That doesn't even make any sense. Anyway, the main take-home message here for the creature designers and speculative artists among us is that the similarities and differences in the creatures you come up with can offer an indication of how related they are. And you can potentially tell millions of years of history without having to say anything at all. All that being said, last week I asked the lab subscribers among us if they would like it if I proposed a creative challenge at the end of these speculative episodes. And I had enough Skullywags get back to me favourably about this, so here's my first challenge to the speculative artists that are watching. I want you to create a hypothetical ancestor of the alien and the predator. This needs to include the bioral jaw configuration, a tail, 4 limbs, and a combination of endoskeleton and exoskeleton would be more likely as well. The environment can be terrestrial or aquatic, doesn't really matter. And here's an example I did up myself in Inkscape. We can go over the feasibility and reasoning behind my choices later if you like, but I just don't want to spoil your fun. Now you could just do this challenge for yourself if you like, or you could also email what you come up with to the lab email in the channel description, and maybe we could do a discussion on it in a future episode. Who knows? We'll see what happens. If you've appreciated this episode of Skullywag Speculative, leave a like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video.